The lawyer's voice was a dull, gray drone, the sound of rain on a tin roof. I'd been sitting in this stuffy leather-bound office for what felt like an eternity, my black dress itching against my skin, my mind still wrapped in the thick fog of grief. It had only been 2 weeks since we buried Mom, 2 weeks since the world had lost its color. I was there to hear the final wishes of the woman who gave me life, a formality I thought would offer some small final connection to her. My sister Chloe sat beside me, her posture ramrod straight, her own grief seemingly encased in a shell of rigid composure. The lawyer, Mr. Davison, a man with a face full of kind wrinkles who had handled our family's affairs for 30 years, was reading from the document. I heard phrases float by: last will and testament, of sound mind and body, all my worldly possessions. I was barely listening. I didn't care about the possessions. I just wanted my mother back. I wanted to hear her voice one more time, telling me everything would be okay. Then 2 words cut through the static in my head like shards of glass. Sole beneficiary. My head snapped up. I looked at Mr. Davison, whose eyes were fixed on the page, a flicker of something unreadable in them. I turned to Chloe. She was staring straight ahead, but I saw the tiny, almost imperceptible tightening at the corner of her mouth. A chill, cold and sharp, snaked its way up my spine, pushing the warm haze of grief away and replacing it with something icy and alert. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice hoarse. "Mr. Davison, could you repeat that last part?" He cleared his throat, his gaze finally lifting to meet mine. There was pity in it. "Of course, Sarah. The clause reads, I hereby bequeath the entirety of my estate, including the property located at 45 Oakhaven Drive, and all assets contained within, to my beloved daughter, Chloe Anderson, who shall be the sole beneficiary of this will." Sole beneficiary. The words echoed in the silent room. The family home, the house where Dad brought Mom as a bride, where Chloe and I took our first steps, where the pencil marks of our heights were still etched on the kitchen doorframe, was no longer mine. Not even a small piece of it. All the memories, all the history, all of it, given to Chloe. Only Chloe. I felt the air leave my lungs. This wasn't possible. Mom's will, the one she'd written with Dad years ago, had been simple. Everything was to be split 50-50, fair and square. That was Mom. She was the one who would meticulously slice an apple in half to make sure our pieces were the same size. She abhorred favoritism. For her to do this, it was a betrayal from beyond the grave. When was this signed?" I asked, the words feeling like gravel in my mouth. Mr. Davison hesitated. He looked down at the paper again. The codicil amending the original will was signed and notarized on May 12th. 1 week before she passed. 1 week before the hospice nurse told us her body was shutting down. A time when she was so frail, so lost in a fog of pain medication and confusion, that she sometimes couldn't remember my name. I looked at my sister. Her face was a perfect mask of sorrow, but her eyes, when they finally met mine, held something else. A glint of triumph, a chilling, absolute victory. And in that moment I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, as solid and as cold as a block of ice in my stomach. My mother hadn't done this. My sister had. Our life, before the long shadow of sickness fell upon it, was ordinary. Beautifully, blessedly ordinary. I'm Sarah. I'm an architect married to a wonderful man, Mark, with 2 kids who are growing up far too fast. We lived about 3 hours north of my childhood home, a distance that felt both too far and just close enough. Close enough for holiday visits, for panicked calls when the basement flooded, but far enough that we had to build our own little world. My sister Chloe was the opposite. She never left. She was a free spirit, a butterfly who flitted from one job to another. A yoga instructor 1 year, a jewelry maker the next. She never married, never settled. Her orbit was always tightly bound to our mother's. While I was building a career and a family, Chloe was building a life within the familiar 4 walls of 45 Oakhaven Drive. The house itself was the 3rd sibling in our family. It was a sturdy 2-story colonial with a wide front porch and a sprawling oak tree in the backyard that Dad had planted the year I was born. The air inside always smelled faintly of Mom's rose-scented lotion and whatever she had been baking that day. The floorboards creaked in a familiar rhythm, a secret language only we understood. It was where we celebrated every birthday, nursed every heartbreak and marked every milestone. That house wasn't just wood and brick. It was the physical archive of our entire lives. Mom was the heart of it all. Even after Dad passed 10 years ago, she kept the spirit of the home alive. She was vibrant, funny, a terrible singer who loved to garden. My phone calls with her were a daily ritual. We talk about everything and nothing. The kids' soccer games, the stubborn weeds in her petunias, the plot of the latest British detective show she was watching. Chloe's relationship with her was different. As she was there, their bond was one of daily routine. They were companions, but there was always a subtle friction, a a low hum of resentment from Chloe that she was the one stuck at home, while I was off living my life. I did my best to help as much as I could. I sent money every month to help with Mom's expenses. I drove down every other weekend to give Chloe a break, to do the grocery shopping and the heavy cleaning. I thought we were a team. Then Mom got sick. It started with a diagnosis that felt like a punch to the gut: pancreatic cancer stage 4. The doctor had delivered the news with a practiced, gentle sorrow, but the words themselves were brutal. A death sentence with a timeline measured in months, not years. My first instinct was to pack her up and move her into our guest room. I had visions of converting the space into a sunny, comfortable sanctuary, filling it with her favorite books and a small television. Mark was completely on board. "Whatever she needs, Sarah. Whatever you need," he'd said, his hand a warm, steady presence on my back. But Chloe shut it down immediately. "She's not leaving her home, Sarah," she'd said over the phone, her voice tight with a kind of fierce possession. "Everything she knows is here. Her garden, her memories of Dad. Uprooting her now would be cruel." I tried to argue. "It's not about uprooting her, Chloe. It's about care. Mark and I can help. The kids can see her every day. She won't be alone." "She's not alone," Chloe snapped. "He has me." There was no arguing with that logic. Chloe was there. I wasn't. Guilt, sharp and heavy, settled in my chest. So we agreed. Mom would stay at 45 Oakhaven Drive, under Chloe's primary care with hospice support. I promised to drive down every weekend, and I started transferring more money into Mom's account to cover everything: private nurses, organic groceries, and anything Chloe said she needed. The first few months were a blur of hospital appointments, medication schedules, and whispered conversations in the hallway. Mom had good days and bad days. On the good days, she was almost herself. We'd sit on the porch and she'd tell me stories about her childhood I'd never heard before. On the bad days, she was lost in a fog of pain, her body frail and her mind clouded. It was during one of those bad weeks that the first tiny crack appeared in my trust. I was on the phone with Mom, her voice weak and wavering. "So many papers," she'd murmured, her words slurring slightly. "Chloe keeps bringing papers. My hand hurts from signing." A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. "What kind of papers, Mom?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "I don't know, sweetie. Important things, Chloe says. For the house." I brought it up with Chloe later that day as casually as I could. "Hey, Mom mentioned you had her signing some things. Is everything okay with the hospice paperwork?" Chloe didn't even look up from the pill organizer she was filling. "Oh, it's just endless. Insurance forms, Medicare authorizations, advance directives. You wouldn't believe the bureaucracy. I'm handling it. Don't worry." It sounded plausible. It was the kind of answer that was meant to soothe, to put a lid on any further questions. And I wanted to believe it. It was easier to accept it. But the word Mom had used, *house*, stayed with me. Then came the incident with the money. I noticed a significant withdrawal from Mom's savings account, $10,000. When I called Chloe to ask about it, her defensiveness was palpable, even over the phone. "It was for Mom's care, Sarah," she said, her voice laced with ice. "There was a deposit required for a specialized hospital bed and some new equipment. Do you want me to send you an itemized receipt?" The sarcasm was thick. "Or maybe you think I'm buying myself a new car?" "Of course not, Chloe," I said quickly, backtracking. I just want to be kept in the loop." "Well, now you're in the loop," she retorted. "Is there anything else?" "I have to go give Mom her meds." The line went dead. I felt ashamed, like I'd overstepped. Chloe was on the front lines, dealing with the daily, gut-wrenching reality of our mother's decline. Who was I, 3 hours away, to question her? I let it go. The final straw, the thing that pushed me from passive worry to active suspicion, happened in early May. I arrived on a Friday evening to find the house quiet. Chloe was out getting groceries. I went into Mom's room to sit with her. She was asleep, but her breathing was ragged. I noticed a dark, ugly bruise on her forehead. Panic seized me. I gently woke her. "Mom, honey, what happened to your head?" Her eyes fluttered open, cloudy and unfocused. "Oh, I fell," she whispered. I tried to get to the bathroom. My heart plummeted. "Where was Chloe?" "In the garden," she said, her voice faint. "Just for a minute." That night, I had a massive fight with Chloe. It wasn't a yelling match, but a tense, tear-filled battle of wills in the kitchen. "She can't be left alone, Chloe. Not for a second," I pleaded. "I was gone for 5 minutes, Sarah. 5 minutes. Am I not allowed to breathe? Am I not allowed to step outside?" Tears streamed down her face, tears of exhaustion and frustration that I knew were real. But the fear for my mother's safety was a roaring fire in my gut. "We need a better system," I said, my mind racing. "We need a camera. A nanny cam." Chloe recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "Absolutely not. I will not have my mother spied on in her own bedroom. It's a violation of her dignity." "It's not for spying," I insisted, my voice firm for the first time. "It's for safety." It's so you can be in the kitchen or the garden and still have eyes on her. It's so I can check in from home and have some peace of mind. It's to help us." I didn't wait for her to agree. The next morning, I drove to the nearest electronics store and bought the best one they had, a small, discreet cube that could be controlled from an app on our phones. I set it up on the high shelf of Mom's bookshelf, nestled between a dusty copy of Little Women and a porcelain bird. It had a clear, wide view of her bed and most of the room. Chloe watched me, her arms crossed, her expression sullen. But she didn't stop me. That little camera became my lifeline. Back home, I'd pull up the feed on my phone a dozen times a day. Most of what I saw was heartbreakingly mundane. A nurse adjusting Mom's pillows, Chloe reading to her, or long silent hours of Mom just sleeping. The faint, tinny sound of her breathing through my phone's speaker was a constant, painful reminder of how little time we had left. It was a window into a life that was slowly and inexorably fading away, and I watched helpless from miles away. The weeks that followed were a descent into the quiet, gray landscape of anticipatory grief. The Nanny cam feed became a constant companion. I'd watch it while making dinner, while sitting at my desk trying to focus on blueprints. And in the dark of night when I couldn't sleep, I watched my sister become my mother's hands and feet. I saw her patiently spooning soup into Mom's mouth, adjusting her blankets and holding a cool cloth to her forehead. The guilt I felt for ever doubting her was immense. She was doing everything. I was just watching. On Tuesday, May 12th, I opened the app and saw a man in a suit sitting by Mom's bedside. He had a briefcase open on his lap. Chloe was there too, standing behind him, her hand resting on Mom's shoulder. I recognized the man instantly. It was Mr. Davison's junior partner, a man named Peters, who had recently joined the firm. A cold prickle of unease went through me. I turned up the volume on my phone, straining to hear. The audio was slightly muffled, but I could make out their words. "Now, Eleanor," Peters was saying in an overly bright, patronizing tone, "we just need to go over this one more time. You understand that this document makes a change to your will." Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "A change. That's right," Chloe said, her voice smooth as silk. "Remember we talked about it, Mom? To make things simpler. So Sarah doesn't have to worry about the house. She's got so much on her plate." My blood ran cold. "So I don't have to worry about the house." What did that mean? "Tired," Mom murmured, her head lolling to the side. "So tired." "I know, Mom. We're almost done," Chloe cooed. She picked up Mom's limp hand. "Mr. Peters just needs you to sign right here." I watched in horror as my sister wrapped our mother's fingers around a pen and guided her hand to the bottom of a document. Mom's signature, usually a firm, elegant script, was a weak, spidery scrawl, barely recognizable. Peters then signed as well, along with a notary he'd brought with him, who had been standing just out of frame. The whole thing took less than 5 minutes. I felt sick. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream, to call the house and demand to know what was happening. But what would I say? That I'd been spying? That I was accusing my sister of something monstrous while she was in the throes of caring for our dying mother? Doubt gnawed at me. Maybe it was simpler. Maybe Mom really did want this. Perhaps I was the selfish one, thinking about property when my mother was slipping away. I saved the video clip to my phone, a knot of dread twisting in my gut, and then I closed the app. A week later, Mom was gone. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and hushed condolences. Chloe was the picture of a devoted, grieving daughter. She delivered a eulogy that had everyone in tears, speaking of Mom's unwavering love and the quiet moments they had shared in those final months. I stood by her side, hollowed out, feeling like a fraud. My grief was real, but it was now tangled up with this dark, ugly suspicion. The day at the lawyer's office, when my suspicion was confirmed, felt surreal. When Mr. Davison read the words "sole beneficiary," I wasn't just heartbroken, I was furious. The white-hot fire of betrayal burned away the fog of grief. After we left his office, I confronted Chloe in the parking lot. The air was cold and damp, with a pungent smell of rain. "What did you do, Chloe?" I asked, my voice trembling with a rage I could barely contain. She wouldn't look at me. She just kept walking toward her car, keys clutched in her hand. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me." I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Mom would never have done that. She would never, ever have cut me out. You made her do it. That day with the lawyer when she was barely conscious. You forced her." Chloe finally looked at me, and her face was a mask of cold fury. The grieving daughter facade had crumbled away, revealing something hard and ugly underneath. "Forced her? Sarah, I was there for her every single day for the last year of her life. I bathed her. I fed her. I held her hand while she was in agony. Where were you? You were 3 hours away, living your perfect life, sending money like it was some kind of substitute for actually being there." Each word was a slap in the face. "That's not fair," I whispered. "I was here every weekend. I paid for everything." "Everything?" she scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. You think money makes up for the nights I spent sleeping on the floor next to her bed because she was afraid to be alone? You think it makes up for cleaning up after her when she couldn't control her own body? That house is what I've earned. It's my compensation for the life I gave up to take care of her. It wasn't a job, Chloe. She was our mother. She was my mother every single day, she shot back. She was yours on the weekends. This is what she wanted. She knew I deserved it. She pushed past me, got in her car, and drove away, leaving me standing alone in the empty parking lot, the cold rain starting to fall. I drove home in a daze. The world outside my windshield was a watery blur. Chloe's words echoed in my head. Had I been that absent? Had my contribution been so meaningless? The grief for my mother was now a double-edged sword. One side mourning her loss, the other mourning the loss of the sister I thought I had. When I got home, Mark met me at the door. He took one look at my face and his own fell. Sarah? Honey, what is it? What happened? I collapsed into his arms and finally let out the sobs I had been holding back. Through my tears, I told him everything. The will, the conversation in the parking lot, and finally, the secret I had been holding on to for weeks. I have it on video. I choked out, my voice muffled against his shoulder. I have proof. He held me tighter. Okay, he said, his voice calm and steady. Hey, let's see it. We went into the living room and I took out my phone, my hands still shaking. I found the file I had saved, the one labeled May 12th. I airdropped it to our laptop so we could see it on a bigger screen. We sat together on the couch, the glow of the screen illuminating our faces in the dim light. I hit play. The scene unfolded just as I remembered it. The smarmy lawyer, my sister's sickly sweet voice, my mother so fragile, so confused, and the moment Chloe took her hand, she forced the pen across the paper. Mark watched the entire 2-minute clip in silence, his expression growing darker with every second. When it was over, he didn't say anything. He just reached out, paused the video on the exact frame where Chloe's hand was covering Mom's, and looked at me. This is elder abuse, he said, his voice quiet but full of a cold, hard anger I had never heard from him before. This is coercion. This isn't just morally wrong, Sarah. This is illegal. Seeing the raw, undeniable proof on the screen, stripped of all my emotional turmoil and self-doubt, was galvanizing. The woman in that bed was not of sound mind or body. She was a victim, and my sister was her abuser. The grief was still there, a gaping wound in my soul. But now another feeling grew alongside it, determination. What do we do? I asked, my voice no longer trembling. It was steady. Mark took my hand. We fight, he said. We get a lawyer, and we show them this video. You're not just fighting for a house, Sarah. You're fighting for your mother's final wish. The real one. The decision to fight was like a dam breaking. All the pent-up anger, the grief, the helpless feeling of being wronged, it all channeled into a single focused purpose. Mark and I spent the entire weekend researching probate lawyers who specialized in contested wills and elder financial abuse. On Monday morning, I made the first call. We found a woman named Helen Pierce. She was in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I immediately trusted. We met her in her office, a space that was modern and bright, a stark contrast to the dark, oppressive room where the will had been read. I told her the whole story from the beginning. I discussed my relationship with my mom, my sister's role as the caregiver, the phone call where my mom mentioned signing papers, and the nanny cam. I felt a flush of shame admitting I had been recording, but Helen didn't even blink. It's a good thing you did, she said, her tone matter-of-fact. Now let me see the video. We played it for her on my laptop. She watched it once, then asked me to play it again, this time leaning in close, her eyes narrowed in concentration. She had me pause it at several points. When Peters asked Mom if she understood, when Chloe spoke on her behalf, and at the moment of the signature. When it finished for the second time, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. Well, she said, a small, grim smile on her face. Your sister and Mr. Davison's junior partner have made several critical errors. A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. They have. First, she began, ticking off points on her fingers, is the obvious issue of testamentary capacity. Your mother, from this footage alone, appears to be in a severely compromised state. She's not lucid. She's not engaging. An attorney has a professional and ethical obligation to ensure the testator is of sound mind. Mr. Peters here seems more interested in getting a signature than confirming comprehension. She continued. Second, and more damningly, is the issue of undue influence. Your sister is present. She is physically touching your mother and she is verbally coaching her. She tells your mother why she should sign, to make things simpler, and so you don't have to worry. That is a textbook example of exerting influence over a vulnerable person. The law is designed to protect against exactly this kind of situation. And the fact that she was the primary caregiver? I asked. That can be both a defense and a liability for her, Helen explained. She can argue that your mother made this change out of gratitude. But given this video evidence, we will argue that she exploited her position of trust and power to manipulate your mother for her own financial gain. Hearing my tangled emotional mess translated into a clear legal strategy was incredibly empowering. For the first time since Mom's diagnosis, I felt like I had some agency, some control. So what's the first step? Mark asked. We file a petition to contest the will, Helen said. We will allege lack of testamentary capacity and undue influence. We will subpoena your mother's medical records for the final months of her life, specifically noting her medication regimen and cognitive assessments from hospice. And we will submit this video as our primary piece of evidence. She looked directly at me. This will get ugly, Sarah. Family disputes are the ugliest of all. Your sister will likely paint you as an absent, greedy daughter. Are you prepared for that? I thought of my mother's weak, confused voice on the video. I thought of Chloe's triumphant look in the lawyer's office. Yes, I said without hesitation. I am. The action started immediately. Helen filed the petition, and as expected, Chloe's response was swift and vicious. She hired her own lawyer, who sent back a scathing response. In their official reply, I was portrayed as a distant daughter who had abandoned her mother, only to swoop in after her death to try and steal the inheritance from the one person who had sacrificed everything. They claimed the video was an illegal recording, a gross violation of privacy, and inadmissible. They'll try to get it thrown out, Helen warned me, but they won't succeed. In this state, as long as one party to the conversation is aware of the recording, in this case you monitoring remotely, it's generally admissible in a civil case like this, especially given the context of protecting a vulnerable person. The legal battle was slow and grinding, a war of paperwork and motions. But the real battle was happening outside the courtroom. Chloe had changed the locks on the house at 45 Oakhaven Drive. I was locked out of my own childhood. She started posting on social media, not directly naming me, but writing long, saccharine posts about her beloved mother and the sacred duty of a daughter, with thinly veiled jabs about family members who only show up when there's something to gain. Relatives started calling. My Aunt Carol, Mom's sister, called me, her voice dripping with disappointment. Sarah, I don't understand. Chloe was there for her. Your mother loved that girl so much. Why would you do this? Dragging the family name through the mud. Aunt Carol, it's not what it looks like, I tried to explain. Chloe manipulated her. I have proof. Proof? Chloe told me you have some secret video that you were spying on your own dying mother. What kind of person does that? The conversation ended with her hanging up on me. It felt like I was being gaslit by my entire family. Chloe had spent years building a narrative of herself as the martyr, the devoted one. My quiet, steady support from a distance was invisible next to her loud, public performance of sacrifice. But I had the video. It was my anchor in a sea of doubt and recrimination. Every time a relative shunned me, every time I read one of Chloe's sanctimonious posts, I would watch it again, not out of anger but to remind myself of the truth. To see my mother's vulnerable face, to hear her weak voice. I wasn't doing this for a house. I was doing this for her. I was her voice now. The day of the deposition was the first time I'd seen Chloe in person since that day in the parking lot. She sat across a long, polished table from me, looking thin and severe. Her lawyer was a bulldog of a man who looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his shoe. My deposition came first. Her lawyer grilled me for hours. He painted me as a cold, career-obsessed woman who saw her mother as a burden. Isn't it true, Ms. Miller, that you moved 3 hours away to prioritize your career over your family? I moved with my husband for a job opportunity and we built a life there, yes, I answered calmly, just as Helen had coached me. And you left the burden of your ailing mother to your sister, did you not? I did not see my mother as a burden. My sister and I agreed that it was best for my mother to remain in her home, and I supported them both financially and with regular visits. He sneered. By supported, you mean you threw money at the problem, isn't that right? It went on like that for hours. But I held my ground. Then it was Chloe's turn. Helen was brilliant. She started gently, asking Chloe to describe her relationship with our mother. Chloe waxed lyrical, painting a beautiful picture of their bond. She spoke about her love and her sacrifice. Then Helen pivoted. Ms. Anderson, were you present when your mother signed the codicil to her will on May 12th? Yes, I was, Chloe said, lifting her chin. She asked me to be there. And you believe she was of sound mind that day? Absolutely. She was lucid. She knew exactly what she was doing. Helen nodded slowly. So when she said, and I quote, tired, so tired, you interpreted that as a sign of lucidity? Chloe's eyes flickered. She was at the end of her life. Of course she was tired. And when you took her hand and physically guided it to the signature line, You felt that was her own free will? I was helping her, Chloe snapped. Her hand was weak. Then Helen leaned forward. Ms. Anderson, what was your mother's primary pain medication on that day? Chloe faltered. I don't know the name. It was a liquid. Was it morphine? Helen asked, her voice quiet. Yes, I believe so. And are you aware that common side effects of morphine, especially in elderly, frail patients, include confusion, delirium, and somnolence? Chloe's lawyer objected, but the question hung in the air. Finally, Helen pushed a laptop to the center of the table and pressed the play button. Let's watch, shall we? The small speakers on the laptop filled the sterile conference room with the tinny sound of the video. The air grew thick and heavy. I didn't look at the screen, I looked at Chloe. As the scene played out, our mother's vacant eyes, Chloe's saccharine voice, the moment she physically pushed Mom's hand across the page, all the color drained from my sister's face. Her carefully constructed mask of martyrdom began to crack, hairline fractures spreading from her eyes to her tightly clenched jaw. She watched herself on the screen, her expression shifting from indignant defiance to a dawning, panicked horror. It was one thing to lie about an event in the abstract. It was another thing entirely to be confronted with the undeniable visual truth of it. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. The bulldog bravado he had displayed during my deposition had vanished, replaced by the weary look of a man who knew he was defending a losing position. When the video ended, silence descended upon the room. It was absolute. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant siren wailing in the city below. Helen let the silence stretch, a tactic I now understood was more potent than any question could be. Finally, she broke it, her voice soft but cutting. Ms. Anderson, does that look like a woman who is of sound mind? Does that look like a woman who is acting of her own free will? Chloe didn't answer. She just stared at the frozen image on the screen, her own hand covering our mother's. A single tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. It was not a tear of sorrow or remorse. It was a tear of defeat. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. We're done here for today, he said gruffly. He looked at Helen. We'll be in touch. He practically pulled Chloe out of her chair and bustled her out of the room without another word. As the door clicked shut behind them, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. My body felt like a live wire, humming with adrenaline and a profound, aching sadness. Mark, who had been sitting silently in the corner of the room the entire time, came over and put his hands on my shoulders. You did it, Sarah, he said quietly. Helen was already gathering her papers. This isn't over, but the tide just turned. Dramatically, they know we have them. Now they have a choice. They can either drag this to a public trial where that video will be played in open court for a judge and jury to see, or they can come to the settlement table. Her prediction was accurate. 2 days later, we received a call. Chloe's lawyer wanted to talk. The settlement was not a joyous victory. It felt hollow. Chloe agreed to have the codicil nullified, reverting the estate to the original will, a 50-50 split. She decided to repay the $10,000 she had withdrawn from Mom's account and would cover both her own legal fees and a portion of mine from her share of the inheritance. In exchange, I agreed that the matter would be settled privately without a public court case. Helen had pushed for more. We could ruin her, she had said. We could pursue criminal charges for financial exploitation of the elderly, but I couldn't do it. Looking at Chloe's face as she watched that video, I didn't see a monster. I saw a deeply broken, resentful, and pathetic person, exposing her to the world, sending her to jail. It felt like a cruelty my mother never would have wanted. Justice was one thing, utter destruction was another. The most challenging part of the settlement was the house, the symbol of our entire family, the heart of the dispute. With the will reverted, we were now co-owners, an impossible situation. I want to buy you out, I told Chloe during a tense phone call which our lawyers mediated. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I'm not selling. Chloe, we can't own it together. It's not realistic. I'm not leaving, she said, and there it was again, that fierce, possessive grip. It's my home. It's our childhood home, I corrected her. It's not just yours. In the end, the law had a solution for that as well. Helen explained the process of a partition action, where a court can force the sale of a co-owned property if the owners can't agree. Faced with that inevitability, where the house would be sold to a stranger, Chloe finally relented. An independent appraiser valued the house, and I used my half of the inheritance along with a loan to buy out her share. The day I received the keys was strange. I drove down to Oak Haven Drive alone. Chloe was already gone. She had packed her things and left without a word, leaving her key with her lawyer. I stood on the porch, the same porch where Mom and I had sat on so many summer evenings, and I put the key in the lock. It felt foreign, wrong. This wasn't how I was supposed to re-enter my home. The house was empty and sterile. Chloe had taken every stick of her own furniture, but she'd also taken things that belonged to the house itself. The grandfather clock from the hall, the landscape paintings Dad had loved, the worn armchair where Mom used to sit and read. She had stripped it not just of her presence but of its soul. I walked through the silent rooms. My footsteps echoed on the bare wood floors. I went into Mom's bedroom. The specialized hospital bed was gone. The bookshelf was still there, but the books were gone. The space where the nanny cam had sat was just an empty shelf, covered in a thin layer of dust. I sank onto the floor, the emptiness of the house pressing in on me. I had won. I had gotten the house. I had gotten justice for my mother. But I had lost my sister. I had lost the family I thought I knew. I had lost the sanctity of my own memories, which were now all tainted by this ugly, sordid affair. The victory felt exactly like grief. The public consequence was not a single dramatic event, but a slow, creeping tide of understanding. There was no courtroom showdown, no moment where I stood up and pointed an accusing finger. The truth, as it often does in families, came out in whispers, in awkward silences, and in conversations that stopped abruptly when you entered a room. After the settlement was finalized, I had the difficult task of calling the family members who had sided with Chloe, the ones who had accused me of being greedy and cruel. I didn't call to gloat. I called to explain. My first call was to Aunt Carol. I steeled myself for another lecture. Aunt Carol, it's Sarah. I started, my voice steady. I wanted to let you know that the legal matter with Chloe has been resolved. Oh, she said. Her tone was cautious. Chloe mentioned something about it. She's moving out of the house. Yes, I've bought her share. The will was reverted to the original, the way Mom and Dad always intended it. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The original? She asked, a note of confusion in her voice. But Chloe said, she said your mother wanted her to have the house as a thank you. I took a deep breath. This was it. Aunt Carol, what Chloe told you wasn't the truth. Mom was not in her right mind when she signed that new will. Chloe had a lawyer come to the house when Mom was heavily medicated, a week before she died. She was coerced. Coerced. The word sounded foreign in her mouth. Chloe wouldn't do that. I have a video of it, Aunt Carol, I said, my voice quiet but firm. That's why she agreed to settle, because the video shows exactly what happened. It shows Chloe guiding Mom's hand to sign a document she didn't understand. The silence that followed was profound. I could hear her breathing, could almost picture her sitting in her floral-patterned armchair, her mind trying to reconcile the two realities, the niece she knew as a dedicated caregiver and the woman I was describing. A video? She finally whispered. By God, Sarah. I didn't need to say more. The truth, once planted, began to take root and grow. Aunt Carol spoke to my uncle. He talked to my cousin. The real story started to spread through the family grapevine. Chloe's narrative, built on a foundation of lies, began to crumble under the weight of a single verifiable fact, the video. I never showed it to any of them. I didn't have to. The knowledge of its existence was enough. It was the ultimate trump card, the undeniable proof that my actions had been born not of greed, but of a need for justice. The most public consequence happened at my cousin's wedding a few months later. It was the first time the whole family had gathered since the funeral. I was nervous about going, but Mark insisted. You have every right to be there, he said. You hold your head high. Chloe was there. We hadn't spoken a single word since the legal proceedings ended. When I walked into the reception hall, I saw her standing with a small group of distant relatives. As I approached, the conversation faltered. People shifted their weight, their eyes darting between me and her. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Chloe looked at me, her eyes full of a new kind of emotion. It wasn't the triumphant glare from the lawyer's office, or the defeated emptiness from the deposition. It was a raw, burning resentment. She saw me not as her sister, but as the person who had taken everything from her. She didn't say hello. She just turned her back on me and walked away. But then something else happened. Aunt Carol came over and hugged me, a real one, warm and sincere. I'm so sorry, Sarah, she whispered in my ear, for not believing you, for not listening. My uncle clapped me on the shoulder. My cousin, the bride, made a point to come to my table and thank me for being there, her eyes full of a sympathy that hadn't been there before. The tide had turned. I was no longer the outcast. I was the one who had been wronged. Chloe, by isolating herself in a fortress of bitterness, had become her own island. People would be polite to her, but the warmth was gone. They looked at her now with a mixture of pity and suspicion. She had won the battle of public opinion early on with her performance of the grieving martyr. But I had won the war with the quiet, unassailable truth. There was no satisfaction in it. Watching my sister move through the wedding reception like a ghost, a polite smile plastered on her face while everyone around her knew what she had done, was just sad. She had gambled everything on a single greedy act, and in the end she hadn't just lost the house. She had lost her family. She had lost her credibility. She had lost her mother's legacy, tarnishing it with her own deception. The house at 45 Oakhaven Drive was supposed to be her reward, her compensation. Instead, it became a monument to her moral failure. I realized then that the most significant consequence wasn't legal or financial. It was the social stain. In a family that valued integrity and fairness above all else, values our mother had instilled in us, Chloe's actions were the ultimate sin. And that was a judgment no court could ever hand down, and no settlement could ever erase. She would carry that with her forever. The first year in the house was the hardest. It felt like I was living in a museum of my own past, a place haunted by the ghosts of what once was. Every creak of the floorboards, every slant of light through the dining room window, brought a fresh wave of memory and a sharp pang of loss. I wasn't just grieving my mother anymore. I was grieving the sister I once had, the family unity that had been shattered, and the innocence of my own memories. Mark and the kids were my anchors. They filled the silent, empty rooms with life again. My son Ben claimed the attic for his fort, and my daughter Lily spent hours under the big oak tree in the backyard, the same one Dad had planted for me. Mark, bless his heart, took on the task of healing the house itself. He repainted the walls, sanded and refinished the floors Chloe's movers had scuffed, and slowly, piece by piece, helped me bring warmth back into the space. We brought some of our own furniture from our old place, but we also visited antique shops and estate sales, looking for pieces that felt right, pieces that felt like Mom. We found a worn leather armchair that looked almost identical to the one she used to have. The first time I saw it in the living room, I burst into tears. They were not tears of sadness, but of a strange, bittersweet gratitude. Healing wasn't a straight line. It was a messy, circular journey. There were days when I would be overcome with rage at Chloe. I'd think about her callousness, her greed, and the way she had used our mother's vulnerability as a weapon. I would pull up the video on my phone not to watch it but to look at the file to remind myself that my anger was justified. But there were other days, quieter days, when I would feel a profound pity for her. I thought about the years she spent as Mom's companion, watching me build a life and a family from afar. I tried to understand the deep well of resentment that must have been growing inside her, a poison she drank every day until it twisted her into someone I no longer recognized. Her betrayal wasn't born from a place of strength, but from a place of deep, gnawing insecurity. It was the desperate act of someone who felt they had nothing and so they tried to take everything. I didn't forgive her. I don't know if I ever will. Forgiveness feels like something you grant to someone sorry, and Chloe has never shown an ounce of remorse. But what I did find, slowly and over time, was a sense of peace. I stopped needing the anger to fuel me. The turning point came on the second anniversary of Mom's passing. I woke up that morning with a heavy heart, but instead of dwelling on the sadness, I decided to do what she would have done. I went out to her garden. It had become overgrown and weedy during the legal battle, a sad, neglected patch of earth. But over the last year I had been working on it. I'd pulled the weeds, tilled the soil, and planted her favorite flowers, roses, lavender, and a row of stubborn petunias. That morning the garden was in full bloom. The air smelled sweet. As I knelt in the dirt, my hands sinking into the cool, rich soil, I felt my mother's presence more strongly than I had in the 2 years since she'd been gone. She wasn't in the empty house or in the legal documents, or in the bitter memories of the fight with my sister. She was here, in the earth, in the flowers, in the act of nurturing something beautiful and making it grow. I finally understood that the house was never the prize. It wasn't a trophy to be won. It was a responsibility. It was a vessel for memory. And it was now my job to fill it with new ones, to honor the old ones, and to ensure that the love that had been built within its walls would not be erased by the ugliness of its last chapter. I sold the house last year. It was a difficult decision, but one that was necessary. After the kids went off to college, it felt too big, too quiet. Mark and I found a smaller place, a cozy cottage with its own little garden. Before we sold it, I went through the house one last time. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen and saw the faint pencil marks of our heights still there. I let my hand trail along the wall, a physical goodbye to a lifetime of memories. The house had served its purpose. It was the battleground where I fought for my mother's honor. And once that battle was won, it was the sanctuary where I learned to heal. Letting it go wasn't another loss. It was the final step in moving forward. I still have the video saved on a secure hard drive in my desk drawer. I don't know why I keep it. Maybe it's a reminder that the truth is worth fighting for. Or perhaps it's a reminder that families, like houses, can be broken, but that with enough love and hard work, they can always be rebuilt. The memories of that time now feel distant, softened by the years. But the lessons they taught me are as clear and as sharp as they were on the day I first watched that terrible video. I learned that grief can make people do monstrous things, but that it can also reveal a strength you never knew you had. I realized that the truth is a powerful, resilient thing. You can try to bury it, to hide it, or to twist it into a new shape, but sooner or later, it will always find its way to the surface. My sister and I have never reconciled. We see each other at the occasional family funeral or wedding, and we exchange polite, empty words that mean nothing. The bond we once shared is gone forever, a casualty of her greed and my refusal to let it stand. And while a part of me will always mourn the loss of my only sibling, I know that standing up for my mother, for the truth of who she was and what she wanted, was the only choice I could have made. I chose to honor her memory over a fractured, false peace. This whole experience forced me to ask myself a tricky question, one that I still think about from time to time. When you are faced with a profound betrayal from someone you love, someone who is supposed to be your closest ally, where do you draw the line between seeking justice and seeking revenge? I had the power to ruin my sister's life, to expose her to the world and let her face the full consequences of her actions. But in the end I chose to stop. I decided to take back what was right and then let her walk away into the life she had created for herself. If you were in my shoes, would you have done the same? Or would you have pushed for that final public measure of justice, no matter the cost to what was left of your family? I'd be interested to read what you think in the comments below. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel for more stories like this one. Your support means the world.